All right, everybody. Welcome to the Compliance Guy Live. Thank you to all who are logging on, tuning in, and just hanging out with me today. As always, I want to say thank you so much because I know each and every single one of you is dealing with an extremely busy schedule. And we're going to talk about decluttering that schedule because we have so many other things to talk about. Today, I can't tell you, I'm going to use words that I haven't used since like I was in college, right? I'm stoked. I'm I'm pumped. I get to spend time with a friend, with an incredible individual. His name is Clint Pulver. For those of you that don't recognize him, shame on you, you should. And I get to welcome him to my show. And Clint is an Emmy Award winning motivational keynote speaker, author, musician, and workforce expert. I had the pleasure of getting to watch and be a part of what I call the Clint Pulver experience down in Florida not too long ago, and it was really interesting. But as part of having Clint on the show, one of the things that I wanted to do today was to talk about his new book, which is "I Love It Here: How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave." I started reading the book, and I'm one of those individuals that I start to read a book, and I think to myself, all right, it's pretty good. There's some interesting things in here. I love Stephen Covey, and I love all these motivational books. I'm always looking for ways to find inspiration and trying to make things better. But the truth is, and I'm not just saying this because Clint's on the show today, and he'll disconnect if I don't say it. But the truth is, I've had an opportunity to speak with a few friends who have actually read the book as well, and we've exchanged notes, and we're going to talk about some of that as we move throughout this podcast and live show today. And again, thank you to all of you who are streaming with us right now. We're live on 6 different platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I have turned on the chat feature, so if you have any questions that you want to ask Clint throughout the episode today, I think he's going to be okay with that. But let me just say, Clint, welcome to the podcast, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to see you again. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor.
Yeah, the honor's all mine, man. I mean, truthfully, for somebody so young, right? You've accomplished so much, and it's really something special to think about the fact that you've been professionally playing drums for more than 20 years. You've headlined at the Vivinet Arena, at the Stadium of Fire, the Kodak Theater in Hollywood. You founded, the UVU Drumline, the Green Man Group. But one of the most interesting things that I think you've done is you started a program called the Undercover Millennial. And I think that has really had a significant impact on CEOs, COOs, leaders of organizations that may have been out of touch, out of tune, and really unwilling to understand what it takes to not only grow a successful business, but to grow successful people. So let's start there, and let's talk about the Undercover Millennial Project, if that's all right.
Yeah. So 5.5 years ago, I was a part of a mastermind group. We were in New York City. We were meeting with other CEOs and executives and talking to them about business and what they've done to be successful. And one of the CEOs that we met with owned a large sporting good chain retail store just division on the East Coast. And we were talking to him about business strategy and how he's had to change over the years and how business has to adapt to a market that's always changing. And we're in Manhattan. He's he's got this thick New York accent. And I'll never forget, he said, you got to adapt or you're going to die. If you don't adapt in business, you're going to die. And I was like, wow, it was a very profound statement. And I said, okay. So then what about your management style? I was just curious. I said, what about when it comes to people? Have you felt the need to change with generations? And he fired back and said, nah, there's no need to change there. And I found it so fascinating that he felt the need to change how he did business strategy to meet the demands of a market that's always changing. But when it came to people, there's no need to adapt. So I thanked him for his time. And remember, we're in the store and I look around and all of his employees were my age or younger. So millennials, Gen Z, college age students, kids in high school. And I thought to myself, Sean, I said, I wonder if they would say the same thing. I wonder if they would have the same perspective that this leader does, that everything's wonderful and there's no need to change and everything's going great.
Right.
So again, thanked him for his time. I had 45 minutes to kill until we needed to be to the next place. I had nothing else better to do. So out of curiosity, I walked up to the first employee that I saw and I just said, hey, I'm just curious, what's it like to work here? And the employee got really quiet, started to look around. It felt like an illegal drug exchange. And he said, honestly, dude, I can't stand it here. He's like, it's just a job, man. We're all numbers. It's, I'm just, I don't even think my managers know that I'm here right now. And I remember thinking, well, then why are you still working here? And I asked him that, and he said, I've already applied to 3 other places. As soon as I get a chance to bounce, I'm gone. And that was, it was a light bulb moment of, oh my goodness, what if the CEO could hear this? And first off, the CEO had no idea, because the perception of leadership versus the reality of the employee experience is usually night and day different, because there's no incentive for an employee to tell that manager or to tell that leader what they really feel and think. But they would tell me. And I went and asked another employee and another and another. And out of 6 conversations that I had in that 45 minutes, at the end of those, 5 out of the 6 of this guy's store's team members, his staff, his employees, 5 out of 6 of them said they would not be working for him and his store in less than 3.5 months. And that was the light bulb moment. That was the moment that started this whole research project, this whole initiative that's now led to 181 plus organizations, over 10,000 employees that I've interviewed as the undercover millennial. But that was the moment. That's where everything began.
And it's funny. Baby boomers say the millennials are so lazy, but yet you found a way to interview 10,000 employees in more than 180 organizations. And it's really funny because obviously, I think you're going to agree with this. Every generation has something to say about the generation that comes after it, right?
That's right.
Oh, those Gen Zs, man, they just don't understand, right? Or it's those millennials or the Generation X or whatever it is.
Yep.
And I think each generation has an opportunity to be able to contribute something significant to society. But the only way to be able to contribute effectively is to understand, to engage with those that come before you, to try to understand the mistakes of their generation, so that those aren't being made again. When I picked up the book, and I'll admit, I started kind of thumbing through it, just looking at different things. And the first thing that caught my attention were these big quotes, if you will, right? And the very first one that caught my attention is, if you want to create lasting, meaningful change, you have to talk about solutions. And I think that's one of the things that people are missing today.
It's easy to talk about problems.
Right? And think about where we are in the world right now. Every day there's a new problem. Every day there's somebody angry about something, somebody dissatisfied with something. I think they said that it takes more facial muscles to smile than it does to actually frown, right? But let's talk about, the motivation for you to write this book, because, look, I could spend a whole day going through every single chapter of this book with you, but I picked some of the chapters that, for me, I think had the most profound impact on where I am right now as one of 10 partners in my firm, trying to push forward with a a podcast to make it successful, to attract more viewers, to be able to convey a good, healthy, positive message. But what was your inspiration for writing this book?
The hope was that we would create better organizations that people never wanted to leave. And that was, when I say organizations, that's not just like the corporate America lingo. That's how do we create better homes? How do we create better families? How do we create better classrooms? How do we just create better environments that people actually want to be a part of? Because again, that perception of the leaders within those organizations versus the reality of the kids or the students or the frontline workers is sometimes very different. And it's just simply because, again, there's this natural innate gap of there's, again, no incentive for people to really speak their truth unless they want to just burn bridges and they don't really care. And I mean, could you imagine if an employee walked up to a boss or a manager and said, "Hey, I just need you to know something. I think this could help you. You micromanage everything that we do as a team. Happy Tuesday." Right? Or think about this, Sean. Like if an employee walked up to a manager and said, "Hey, I just need you to know that every time we win as a team, you take all the credit. Oh, and then every time we lose as a team, you blame everybody else. I think it's important for you to know that. Happy Saturday." Like nobody's gonna say that. Like employees they don't say that. There's no incentive to say that. So instead, what do? They just leave 3 months later. They leave the organization. And then it leaves the manager scratching their heads going, "Oh, we never saw it coming." Or that's where I hear the managers blaming a generation, or nobody wants to work. Nobody wants to work these days. Maybe the question is, maybe they just don't want to work for you.
Yeah.
And I know that's hard for some people to hear. And again, there's lots of realities within this equation. But again, that was the hope that this book would close the gap, that would help maybe a manager and an employee to go, okay, you know what? Maybe there's some things I'm not seeing. Maybe my perspective is a little different than the reality of what my people experience. So I'm going to read this book and get that perspective gap a little bit closer so that I can relate and connect and create an organization that people never want to leave.
And that's so critical, right? But I'll tell you, at the end of the book when I closed it, and it was really funny because I was sitting there, and it was my wife. She's just a great lady, and I was laying in the bed last night, and I was reading the book again, right? Especially the chapters that I wanted to talk about because obviously, you know, no matter who you have on, if you're going to have an author of a book on, regardless of who they are, you got to be prepared. You've got to be able to engage in a conversation that lets them know that you're as interested in what they have to say as the people who are going to be listening to this thing on podcasts or watching it live or watching the recorded version of it. And she said to me as I was reading, she goes, "Hey, is the TV bothering you? Do you need me to turn the volume off?" And I just kind of looked at her and smiled and said, "No, I don't even hear it."
Yeah.
Because what I was starting to get to a point of realizing as I got to the end of the book and I was closing it was I want to be a Mr. Jensen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the marketplace is missing.
Yes.
I think, look, we all talk about how we want to make the world a better place, how we want to help humanity be better. But I think we have to take small steps, right? And I think if we can take that first small step to have an everlasting positive impact on just one individual, whether it's in our personal life or whether it's somebody professionally, we get to change the narrative one person at a time. So Mr. Jensen was a huge contributing factor to the man that you are today. Can you talk about Mr. Jensen and sort of how that story came about?
Yeah, so I was the kid in school that always just had a hard time sitting still. I was the kid that always moved and just had a ton of energy, and everybody saw that limitation, that inability to sit still. They saw the problem. And I had one teacher, Mr. Jensen, who told me to stay after class. And he said, listen, you're kind of the kid that's on the list. You tap and you move a lot, and you do it in my class, you do it in everybody else's class. I know you get teased. You have a lot of energy. And he said, but I've watched you though. And he said, it's crazy. He said, you'll take a pen and you'll start writing with your right hand, and then you'll tap with your left hand, and then you'll switch the pen and you'll start writing with your left hand and you'll tap with your right hand. And he looked at me and he said, I think you're ambidextrous. And I always joke and say, no, I'm Presbyterian. He goes, no, that's not what it means. He said, no. He said, can you tap your head and rub your belly? And I gave it a go and I could do it. And he said, can you switch your hands and do that? And I literally, without thinking about it, I could do that. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer. And he created a moment. I talk about this a lot in the book, and it's something that I saw in my research time and time again when I asked people undercover what it was like to work at places. And when they would respond with, I love it here, and then I would ask why, they always talked about moments that leaders created, moments that the culture created, moments that the team or a manager gave them the freedom or created a moment to create moments in other people's lives, or that moment that the manager did something for them that got to the part about them. And that's just what they talked about. That's what we remember. We don't remember days. We remember moments in our lives.
And that's one of the things that you say. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's one of the things that you say. It's all about that single moment in time.
Yes. And he designed it. That's an interesting point, because in this moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back in his desk, he opened up the top drawer, and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he put them in my hands and he said, Clint, listen, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I want you to take these sticks and just promise me that you'll keep them in your hands. Let's just see. He created a moment that represented possibility. It represented potential and worth and the possibilities of what could be. And it changed my life forever. I was no longer a problem kid. I was a drummer. And that was cool. And that gave me identity. And that gave me something to believe in and to lean into. And for the last 23 years, I've traveled all over the world as a professional drummer. And it all came back to that one moment that somebody created. And that's what's winning right now in the workforce. It's what's winning in homes. It's what's winning in classrooms. It's the moments we choose to create. And it's a powerful thing to be a part of.
It is. And, every day, in my life, I look for inspiration, because when the pandemic hit, right, I was traveling prior to the pandemic. I traveled 42 to 46 weeks a year, right?
Yeah.
Diamond medallion, all these different things with Marriott and Hilton. And, it was just, flying with my hair on fire all the time, just to be able to, find that moment to slow down. And then the pandemic hit. And, as we got more and more into it, it was like, wow, what's going to be my inspiration for, getting out of bed today, turning on that computer, doing some, work, because work essentially came to a halt until we started to wrap our head around that, they were going to be shutting down hospitals. They were going to be shutting down physician practices. Things were going to be done remotely. And then I got these opportunities, because, the opportunity to sit on a governor's task force, the opportunity to do all these different things. So I started thinking to myself each and every single day, to keep myself, sane and to keep myself going, I need to find those single moments every single day to inspire me. And then maybe I can find a way to inspire others. And that's sort of what led to me, starting up this podcast was, finding topics, finding information that I know people need, but don't have the time or the desire to go through and read all of these, different federal registers and all of these different legal documents. And, it was my hope that, I could inspire the people coming up behind me in the world of regulatory compliance and health law to say, hey, that's important. This is a public service that somebody's doing. This is my inspiration. And, I found myself several times, reading through this book, finding little nuggets of inspiration each day. And I know it kind of sounds corny, but it's the truth. And, in one of the chapters, you talk about a changing workforce. And I think this is one of the things that people aren't embracing, right? Because change, no matter how positive it is, it's always going to be met with some form of resistance. But can you talk about, from your perspective, what you're seeing as that changing workforce?
Yeah, we've done research during COVID-19 undercover. I'm actually doing an organization next week, because it's a big concern right now with employers trying to rehire people, find good talent, keep the talent that they have. During COVID-19, as we've done this research, we found that really employees have two things on their minds. Number one, they all remember and have talked about how they were treated during COVID-19. When I ask, what's it like to work here? How's it been? Do you feel like you're going to stay here? Most people go back to COVID-19. They talk about what happened in 2020. I've heard some pretty horrific things that leaders did in a time of chaos. I've heard some really beautiful things that leaders did. And regardless, people remember. And if it was something on the side of fear and negativity and frustration and the chaos of what that fearful time brought, people are on their way out, and they're looking right now for another opportunity, because that leads to the second thing, number two, which is they've all had time to think. As COVID-19 has really dismantled a lot of the routine that you spoke about this, Sean, and that you had this routine of flying and you were in your groove and you were doing life, and then all of a sudden everything got disrupted.
Right.
It changed everything. It's given everybody time to think. And now people are realizing, my goodness, does my job today look the same as it did in 2019? And most people would answer that question with a resounding no. My job's different. I'm doing twice as much. I'm doing different things. My team looks differently. I'm now working at home. I don't even go to the office. We can go to the office if we want to. My hours are changing. My pay is changing. And now people are realizing too, my goodness, I could work in New York City and live in Colorado and make 3 times as much and only work 3 days a week and work whenever I want to.
Right.
Like, that's a reality that many people are contemplating and understanding and thinking through. And so as we're coming out of this, and the old routine of what used to be is now wanting to come back to that, it's hard. We're finding a ton of friction. There's a lot of change that needs to take place, but we are still finding, and again, this is what the book talks about. I dedicated a whole chapter to this, to brace for impact, because this will not be the last time that this type of situation occurs. I don't care if it's a stock market thing, an economy thing, a pandemic, a hurricane, other crises always happen, and we need to learn and understand how we can change and evolve during those times of crisis, while still maintaining a foundation of loyalty, engagement, customer service, profitability. And it's been really neat to see some organizations and what they've done to maintain that through some changing and very difficult times.
Yeah, there's no doubt that, what the workforce looked like prior to 2020 versus what it looks like now, coming out on the backside of this public health emergency, it's 180 degrees. I think there's been a lot of things, right? I think there's been a lot of things that have been positive. There's been some really good things that have come out, and from the healthcare industry perspective, but there's been some really devastating changes that have had to take place. And that takes me to what I think is, honestly, I think this is my favorite chapter of the book. You want to take a guess what my favorite chapter of the book is?
Chapter 2 or chapter 8?
Nope. Chapter
Nope.
4.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4, the mentor manager.
Yes. Yes. It's a great chapter.
It is. And it starts off really, really strong. And let me just read a quick passage about this. Some would argue that loving your job means to be, quote unquote, on fire each day, to wake up each morning excited to go to work. Others would say that we need to learn to love what we already do instead of always trying to find the perfect job.
Yeah.
That's that dynamic that exists
Big time.
right now. And then you talk about a gentleman by the name of Tim Grover, and he's an author of a book called Relentless: From Good to Great to Unstoppable. And he says, quote, "You don't have to love the hard work. You just have to crave the end result so much that the hard work becomes irrelevant."
Yes. I love that.
So you've had an opportunity to meet a lot of fascinating people through your journey. I think it's what now, 10 years that your Undercover Millennial program has been going on?
Yeah, it's actually been going on a little bit less than that, but it's been,
Okay.
Yep, but it's been for a good amount of time.
Yeah. You ever find yourself just blinking and going, how did I get here?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So you and I actually have something in common besides the love of Def Leppard.
Yes.
We both were pilots.
Sean, I didn't know. I don't think we've talked about that before.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. So, I had to give up flying after coming back from a flight. I wound up having some real difficulty, looking at the running rabbits and trying to figure out red over green, red over red, and started to recognize that I couldn't differentiate with the colors. So, luckily got cleared to land and everything. I was flying into, as a matter of fact, Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport. And it was in a 172.
Yep.
And went the very next morning to an FAA doctor, and I did a pinwheel test. And turns out I'm colorblind.
Wow.
And it impacted my ability to be able to fly. I could no longer have my Class A, medical for the FAA. But yeah, I started flying, and it was really funny because I was reading this chapter, and you were talking about flying, and for you were talking about fixed wing or rotary blade or whatever it was. You didn't care as long as you were up in the air. That's all that mattered. Me, the rotary blade scared the bejesus out of me. So I stayed away from those. I didn't have the best coordination on trying to figure out my pitch and, all that other fun stuff. But, for me, when I was reading this chapter, you started talking about every pilot remembers their solo.
Totally.
And I'll never forget mine. And and I'll never forget landing and having them rip my shirt and do all that fun stuff.
Yep.
But for me, mine was so impactful. It actually scared me. Because I took off from Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport in a Cessna 152. For people who don't know what that is, it's a 2-seater little airplane, and yeah, it's really small. And your max cruise speed, you're probably around 85 knots if you're lucky, something like that.
Yeah, if you got a nice tailwind.
Yeah, with a good tailwind. And my solo was going from the Fort Lauderdale Executive Airport to Fort Lauderdale International Airport. And I was being offered the opportunity, to land on the main runway. And this was in 1990. Okay. So I'm dating myself a bit. Okay. I was actually flying planes before I actually was driving a car legally.
Yep. I can relate.
And, I had to announce, right? Because you remember your solo, right? You have to announce to the airport that you're coming in, that you're on
Yep.
a solo flight, that you want to, touch and go. And I remember them saying to me, okay, you're clear, make your turn to base and then make your final. And I'm coming in and I'm about 2.5, 3 miles out from touching down on the main runway at Fort Lauderdale International. And all of a sudden I hear Cessna, and they call my tail number, expedite to the runway. You have an L1011 5 miles out at 186 knots. And I think I was doing like 60.
Like, pick it up, Sean.
Yeah. And I I hear the pilot from the L1011, it was a Delta Airlines pilot, come on and say, popping the cherry on this flight, aren't you? Throttle up, buddy. And I just remember, oh my God. And my best friend Derek and his wife now were, his girlfriend back then, they were sitting in the tower at Fort Lauderdale International Airport because they were allowed to go in and watch me with his dad. And when I landed, I was so nervous. I smacked down and I porpoised down the runway, bouncing it. And everybody in the tower was like, ooh, oh.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things, because we both worked at the airport, towing airplanes, fueling the airplanes,
Yep.
so there's some fun similarities. And I think that's more of what kept me involved in reading. But one of the things that you talked about was something that happened
Yeah.
at the airport. Talk about that.
Well, at my job, is that the story you're referring to? I wrecked the wing into the side of the hangar door. Yeah. So I was the lineman, and I would work at towing all the airplanes around, and I towed a Cessna 172 right into the hangar door and dented the whole wing, and was literally fired on the spot because of that mistake. So I use that kind of analogy of just showcasing different managers in my life, and how.
But you fessed up to it. That was the big thing. You fessed up to it, because it would have been easy for somebody, towing the airplane to put it back onto the line, or to, put it back into the hangar, and, put the other airplanes in front of it, and, walk away. Right. Yeah. And somebody could have come along later and said, holy crap, what happened to the wing? Yep. I think it was the wingtip, right?
Yep.
And, but, you looked at that and said, I can't walk away from my responsibility. I have to own it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what's so important. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about. You talk about the 4 types of managers.
Yes.
Can we go through the 4 different types of managers?
Yeah. So you've got in every organization these 4 types of managers that exist, and then they're really, the outcome that they create is based off of 2 variables. Their standards that they have in the organization, and then their ability to connect. So standards and connection. Standards, when I say that, I mean like the responsibilities of the job, making sure that people show up on time, making sure that we're profitable, making sure that we're safe in our jobs, making sure that protocols being followed. Like, those would be standards that an organization has. The second piece, though, is connection. And that's the ability to empathize, the intangibles, the soft skills, the ability to realize that your people, your employees, they have a life outside of work. And how to relate, and how to listen, and how to understand and hear them. So those are the 2 variables. So the first manager that we find in every organization is the removed manager. So I called them removed because they're literally in the organization, but they're not into the organization. They're tired, they're burnt out. So they're low on standards. They're also low on connection. So that created disengagement in the employee's experience. They were just disconnected with the leader. They could care less because the leader cared less. There was no reason to listen. There was no reason to understand or connect or build a relationship. It was just kind of there. The second manager that we found is the buddy manager. So they're low on they're low on standards, but they're high on connection. We call them the buddy because they want to be everybody's friend. This is the manager that wanted to be liked more than they were respected. So then what this created in the employee experience was this sense of entitlement. And I saw this undercover when I would go in, and you would hear these employees talk about a buddy, a homie, who was the manager. But then I would talk to the manager and how difficult it was for the manager to get anything done
Right.
because he was friends with everybody. He was the manager that would go and play Xbox on the weekends with all the team. And then Monday morning, he's like, hey, we got to do better. And everyone's like, yeah, I just saved you in Call of Duty on Friday. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it just doesn't work. And so it created a sense of entitlement. The third manager is the controller. So they're high on standards, low on connection. This is that old school management style. Put your head down, go to work. Command and control. I'm not here to be your friend. I show you that I love you because I give you a paycheck. Smile. Tomorrow's going to be worse. It's just this old school, my way or the highway mentality.
Right.
And so this created in the employee experience rebellion, constant butting of heads, pushback, this constant, I'm going to go toe to toe with you instead of shoulder to shoulder. And then the fourth manager is the mentor manager. And really the central focal point of the whole book. And this is what people talked about. Again, I need to mention this, Sean, because the book is not another leadership book written by like some leadership expert. That's not what I am. This is a book that's written by 10,000 employees who knew when their leaders were getting it right.
Right.
And when I found employees that felt that way, that said, I love it here, they talked about their job in a significant way. They never described a leader. They never talked about a manager. What they talked about was a mentor, someone who was equally high on standards as much as they were on their ability to connect. High on standards, high on connection. And what did this create in the employee experience? It created respect. This respect mentality of they earned the will of those who chose to follow them. That's what was so cool about it. You can't become a mentor, and that's why I call it mentorship, because you can't become a mentor until the mentee invites you into their heart. Mentorship has to be earned, and that is why it's so powerful. And when managers and leaders and anybody with a title can achieve the position of mentor through the lens of their people, that's where they start to win.
That is a point that I want to make sure it doesn't just fly past the people who are listening to this on a podcast or listening or watching us right now. It's one thing to be able to say, I want to be your mentor, or it's something else for somebody to say, I'd really like for you to be my mentor. But you can't truly be a mentor until they invite you into their heart. That's the point that you were just making. And I think that's so important, because you can't force that onto somebody, and you can't be forced into that.
Yes.
That's
And that's
so
why, if you look at your life, Sean, if you've ever had mentors in your life, they became the mentors in your life because you chose that. It was because of who they were. They were never assigned to you necessarily. They became that because when you looked at them, you said, man, that is somebody that connects me to my dreams. That's someone that will help me. That's someone that will advance me. That's someone that can move me forward. And you voluntarily chose to reach out and connect with them. You liked yourself best because you were with them.
Yep.
So that's what the book talks about, is helping managers to become mentors.
Absolutely. And there's just a couple of last things. I mean, like I said, I could have talked to you all day long about this book, right? So, Stephen R. Covey is somebody who I really enjoy. He's a fascinating individual, great speaker, great writer. And one of the things that he talks about in leadership is communicating to another person their worth and potential so clearly that they are inspired to see it in themselves.
Yep.
But you offer a different perspective. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I don't think that I argue a little bit with Stephen Covey on that. That it's not so much leaders, it's mentors. There's a difference. I think traditional leadership is about someone who stands at the front of the ship and they cast the vision. And that's what people talk about when we talk about leaders. You're the visionary. You're setting the tone. You're telling everybody where we need to be, and we got to get people from point A to point B to point C. And you're a leader if people follow you. But mentorship is again, it has to be chosen. Yeah, it's not something you can just give a title to and say, do your thing, cast the vision, and then get people to comply. It is mentors that have the ability to take care of people on the ship and get to the part about people on the ship. It's not so much about the company's vision. It's not about the company's mission. It's about the people's mission.
Right.
So it is mentorship that truly communicates a person's potential and worth to the point that they see it within themselves.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. One of the other things that I enjoyed was reading about your conversation with Jeff Savilico.
Mm-hmm.
For
Great
folks, for folks who don't know who Jeff is, this guy is one of the most incredible performers. He's a juggler. I think the guy could juggle just about anything that you throw at the guy, right? And part of your conversation with him, was talking about how many balls does he juggle during his act. And it was really interesting. There was a conversation between 5 or 7. And the thing that I thought was really interesting about that conversation was what he said when you asked him why he doesn't just go for it, juggle the maximum amount that you can. And his response was, the audience doesn't remember how many balls you juggled. What they do remember is how many balls you dropped. And I think that ties back into, if I'm correct, with creating that single moment in time where
Mm-hmm.
people remember the profound thing that you did in a positive way to eliminate the noise and to remove the focus on anything negative.
Yeah. I've never had in the 10,000 interviews, 10,000 plus interviews now that I've done, I've never had anybody ever tell me, I work here because our company runs the best meetings. They're so good at time management. I just will never leave. Nobody talked about that.
Yeah.
They talked about the moments. They talked about the small, little, simple things that done consistently over long periods of time that added up to be a lot. They talked about those moments. I also talk about in that chapter the power of simplicity.
Yes.
Right? So many times as leaders, we're really good at the to-dos. We're really good at the to-do list, all of the things that we need to be doing. Most of us create to-do lists. We love that shot of dopamine every time we check something off. We're killing it today, staying productive.
You're
right?
going right where I was leading, and I
Yeah.
wrote the to don't list.
Yeah, the power of a to don't list. What are some things that you can simplify so that instead of juggling 12 balls, as cool and wonderful and productive as that may look and seem, you're gonna end up dropping balls. You're gonna end up dropping connection moments. You're gonna be you're so busy trying to boil the ocean that you have no time to really truly connect. Right? Again, they don't care how many meetings you have and how busy your email is. What they care about is when you got to the part about them, when you created a moment of wow. And you can do that in a simple way that's just as profound as sometimes we think that being busy and growing and scaling a business is. But it's the simple things that people really, really need. That's how we connect. And we expect that of our employees. You want them to connect with the customer. You want them to connect with their work. You want them to engage. You want them to be immersed in the company. But then when we flip that script and we look at you as the leader, you're so busy that you have no time to connect. And you ask this of other people, but you don't give the same in return.
Right.
Again, a reason why we have this perspective gap. That's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. And that leads me to the last thing that I wanna harass you about in your book. That's the 5 C's.
Yeah. 5 C's of mentorship. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's close out this part of talking about the book with defining what the 5 C's are. I think that to me is the crescendo that I was hoping to be able to build us to. And let's bring that one home.
Yeah. So when I would go into an organization and I would ask people why they worked there, and I'd walk up to the first person and they would say, I love Susie, my manager, Susie. She's just amazing. I mean, what she does for me. And I'll never leave. I work for Susie. And then I go to the next employee and they'd say the same thing. I'm like, who's Susie? I'm like, oh, she's the manager. She was at another firm. She came over here. I was with her at the other firm, and I left that firm and followed Susie. Why? Why? What was it that was so magical about these great leaders, these great mentors, that people never wanted to leave? People wanted to work harder for them. They became the Mr. Jensens. Why? What were the characteristics? And out of all of the research, we were able to narrow it down to 5 core characteristics that if you become a mentor ever in the life of somebody else, it's because when they look at you, you possess these 5 C's. Number 1 is confidence. Number 2 is credibility. Number 3 was competence. Number 4 is candor. And number 5 is the ability to care. Those 5 things. Confidence is a mindset. Are you confident in what you're talking about? Are you confident in who you are? Are you confident in the way you communicate? Are you confident that I can get you from point A to point B to point C? If you're not confident in that, then the chances of me choosing you as a mentor, pretty slim. I also want to know, if I choose to mentor from you, what's your credibility, right? That's number 2. What's your background? What's your history? What's your resume? Where have you been? What have you done? What gives you the right to talk to me and to help me to move forward? And then number 3, they were competent. They weren't just theorists, they were practitioners. I look at my field as a professional speaker, and if I want to mentor with someone who's speaking, I don't want to mentor with someone who was speaking and was hot and doing great on stage 20 years ago.
Right.
I want to know someone who's killing it right now. If I want to mentor with a drummer, are you someone that just knows everything about percussion theory? Or are you gigging on the weekends? Are you playing? Do you know what's working as a professional musician right now? That mattered to people. And then number 4 was candor, the ability to have honest conversations, to create relationships that were so strong that honesty could exist. Mentorship is really key because these mentors had the ability to create those relationships where they could speak honestly to the mentee. They could tell the mentee if they weren't doing well or if they needed to change. They could have hard conversations about, well, this is not going to take place because this is happening.
Right.
Or you need to change this in order for this to happen. But they had earned the right of an advocate in the eyes of the people that they mentored, and they weren't just a developer, right? They weren't a manager that's just trying to manage tasks, do your job, get things done. But they took the role of advocate. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you grow. We've aligned ourselves on a common goal. I'm showing you that I'm the person that's going to help you achieve that goal. But I've also made the deposits of trust in your life with connection, and that allows me to make some withdrawals. That allows me to have some honest conversations with you. Because again, the goal is to keep the main thing, and I'm going to honestly help you to do that. So candor was key. And then number 5 is the ability to just give a darn.
Yep.
To really care. When those people knew that, okay, you've got my best interest in mind. You are with me. You're with me. Let me say that again. You are with me. You're not just the boss, but you're on my team. You're here with me to help me win, to help me succeed. And when you can carry those characteristics, when you become those 5 characteristics in the eyes of people, man, it's so powerful. It's mentorship at its core. So those are the 5 things that we really talked about and identified. And there are 5 things that every great leader or manager can adapt more so that they can become the mentor.
Well said, man. Really, really well said. Folks, if you have not had an opportunity to pick up Clint's latest book, it is I Love It Here: How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave. I picked mine up on Amazon. I've had great conversations and discussions with several of my friends who have also picked up the book. Now, one of the things that you said just a moment ago was, are they gigging on the weekend? Are they jamming? Are they playing? What are the odds that you can take us out of this show with a little jam?
We could maybe try. I don't have the drums connected and hooked up. We can let me see what I can do. Let me hang on.
Well, your sound is good enough. You may not have to.
I know, right? Let me see here. Let me see if I can just turn one camera on, if that works. Hold on. see if we can create a moment here, get some magic to happen. I've only got, let's see if this works. Let's go right here. It's not picking that up. Hang on. Hang on, Sean. I got to turn on the other camera.
You got it.
Hold on, everybody. We're a little late, but it'll be worth the wait. All right. Here we go. This is the ultimate test. Boom.
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
We did it. We did it.
And I know I got a very good buddy of mine listening, Eric Rubenstein,
There we go.
who is a drummer in his own right. And I know he's been sticking around to hear this. So,
All right.
Clint,
Right
with that
on.
said, take it away, brother.
All right. Here we go.
Man, if I ever start a band, you're my first call.
Did it work?
It worked,
Did
man.
the sound work?
That was spectacular.
Amazing.
And that was all without any warm up, man. I hope you didn't pull a muscle or anything.
I know, right? I'm getting old, Sean. I'm getting old.
Yeah, you're not old until you get what I have growing here. That's the colors that it shouldn't be. But Clint, listen, man, your schedule is jam packed with speaking events and writing and your undercover millennial work. And for you to take an hour out of your day and to rearrange your schedule like you did to come on this program with me and to share all the incredible insights on leadership and mentoring and creating that single moment in time. I can't tell you how much that means to me. And I know those who are going to be listening to this podcast down the road, those who joined in today live, or those who are going to be watching it on the recorded version, I know they're going to appreciate it almost as much as I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sean. It's an honor. I appreciate you and your advocacy and support and reading the book and all you've done to help us promote the message and the good that we're trying to do in the world. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm going to continue to do that because, I can't tell you how much your work matters to owners of organizations, to people that are in roles of leadership, and to really helping employees to understand what it is that they need to do to make their work environment work for them. And that means opening lines of communication with people who can foster that change. You've got to be a change leader. And I think your message comes across loud and clear. I thoroughly enjoyed reading that book. I'm looking forward to your next one when it comes out. I hope when it does, you'll give me an opportunity to bring you back onto my podcast, and we'll be able to talk about that book when it comes out, because I know you're doing the undercover COVID work that we talked about. So that's going to be really exciting to see, and it'll be interesting to see where we were pre-pandemic to what your research shows and says we're at on the backside of this thing.
Totally. Sean, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of another Compliance Guy Live podcast. Again, special thanks to my very good friend, Clint Pulver. Remember, you could check him out online at clintpulver.com. You could also pick up his book, I Love It Here: How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave. You can find it on Amazon or any one of a number of places where you love to pick up your books. Again, thanks for tuning in, logging on, and just hanging out with us today. And remember, be good to yourself, but more importantly, be good to others. And until next time, take care.